Gujarat Ecological Education and Research Foundation presents this film, Coral Reefs, Gulf of Kachchh, Gujarat. The rich and dynamic marine life of coral reefs add to the splendor of living worlds of ocean. Evolution of corals as primitive organisms began at the start of Paleozoic era about 500 million years ago and took the present form by the end of Mesozoic era 65 million years ago. Over these ages, corals adapted to survive and proliferate in colonies. Ocean and sea currents as well as tides add to the dynamism of the hydrosphere. Their impacts on the climate and biodiversity are more near continental coasts. The high tide and low tide divide intertidal zone in the coast, which gets exposed and inundated twice in 24 hours. The marine aquatic ecosystems have more number of life forms than are found on the terrestrial as well as freshwater ecosystems. The biodiversity of oceans and seas include free-floating planktons, seagrass, seaweeds, invertebrates, vertebrates, besides several other microorganisms. The marine invertebrate animals include reef and non-reef forming corals belonging to phylum Coelenterids or Cnidarians. They look like plants due to sedentary habit, and its colors due to presence of symbiotic zooxanthellae. Gujarat, a western state of India, has a long coast of about 1,675 kilometers with the Arabian Sea between latitudes 20 degrees north and 24 degrees north latitudes. In Arabian Sea, the northernmost distribution of corals is in the Persian Gulf and in the Gulf of Kachchh. Gulf of Kachchh in Arabian Sea is situated 23 degrees north, that is near the Tropic of Cancer, whereas the Great Barrier Reef in Australia is situated on 23 degrees south, that is near the Tropic of Capricorn. Red Sea, Gulf of Aden, Gulf of Oman, Gulf of Arabia, and Persian Gulf are located between 10 degrees north to 30 degrees north in the Middle East and are influenced by Northern Arabian Sea. Comparison of hard coral species diversity indicate that Red Sea is 5 times richer compared to the Gulf of Kachchh, and Persian Gulf is 1.2 times richer than the Gulf of Kachchh. The similarity between coral species of Red Sea and Persian Gulf with that of the Gulf of Kachchh is 13 and 31% respectively. There is no endemic species in the Gulf of Kachchh. However, Acanthracia hilly is well-distributed species in the intertidal zone of Gulf of Kachchh, but not found in the other Indian coral reef areas. This is a scientific mystery of discontinuous distribution of this species between Middle East corals and Gulf of Kachchh, as well as Australia and Gulf of Kachchh. Gulf of Kachchh and Gulf of Mannar have more similar species in comparison to species similarity between Gulf of Kachchh and Lakshadweep, as well as the Gulf of Kachchh and Andaman Nicobar Islands. This is because of the similar sea environment conditions of Gulf of Kachchh and Gulf of Mannar. In 1998, El Niño South Oscillation resulted in varying degrees of coral bleaching and mortality throughout the India. However, in the same year, only about 11% coral bleaching was observed in the Gulf of Kachchh, and no significant mortality was observed subsequently. In 2010, widespread coral bleaching was observed on several reefs of the world. In Gulf of Mannar, 87.24% coral bleaching with 25.71% subsequent mortality was recorded. Lakshadweep recorded 81.8% bleaching with 23% subsequent mortality, whereas Gulf of Kachchh recorded 80% bleaching and no significant mortality. Other than these small creatures, dolphins, dugong, sea snake, turtles are an integral part of the reef ecosystem. The intertidal reef provides an excellent feeding habitat for migratory as well as resident shorebirds. The Gulf of Kachchh is an important location on the route of migratory birds coming from Europe and other northern and Central Asian countries. The productivity offered by coral reefs also enabled the formation of seagrass beds and mangrove as associate ecosystems. Oceans act as a net carbon sink and reduce atmospheric carbon dioxide. Biogenic carbonate sediments, that is, calcium carbonate deposits by marine organisms such as shells and coral reefs, are major long-term stock of carbon dioxide and thereby mitigate climate change impacts. The coral reefs provide a home for 25% of all marine fish species. Annually, fisheries in coral reef ecosystem yield at least 6 million metric tons of fish catch worldwide. In Gujarat, a west coast state, value of annual fish catch is worth about 40 billion rupees, and with value addition, the total contribution to the economy is about 80 billion rupees. This activity provides direct and indirect employment to about 3 lakh families. Contribution of Gulf of Kachchh to the fisheries activities is highly valuable. Such high-value economic benefits are the outcome of marine ecological services dependent on healthy mangrove, coral, and estuarine ecosystems. Conservation measures with improved scientific insight have further prevented degradation of Gulf of Kachchh coral reefs. Education and awareness of local communities and other stakeholders is an important component of conservation measures that are being practiced in the Gulf of Kachchh. Marine ecological education through nature camping activities at several sites of Gulf of Kachchh facilitates stakeholders to gain scientific information and awareness as well as personal exposure to the functioning and interrelationship of these ecosystems. Mankind has not adequately understood the rich marine biodiversity and its complex and dynamic functioning. This calls for more focused research and monitoring. In case of Gulf of Kachchh corals, natural reproduction and recruitment, growth, reef building, health of corals, cyclic climatic impacts on corals, habitat monitoring, and study of habitat viability are the main focus of concurrent research. Regular and periodical studies of distribution of coral species in the Gulf of Kachchh, their diversity and abundance, as well as monitoring of the physical, chemical, and biological habitat parameters are essential components of long-term conservation of corals in the Gulf of Kachchh. To mitigate historical damage, research-based ecological restoration of degraded coral reefs is initiated in the Gulf of Kachchh. Introduction and reintroduction of corals through transplantation is being attempted for this purpose. Coral reefs of the world in general and Gulf of Kachchh in particular are part of life support natural ecosystems. Mankind, along with other life forms, get benefits of the coral ecosystems. Corals, like many other organisms, have made huge evolutionary efforts over millions of years to be useful to our only living planet. Coral reefs are fragile and face threats of rapid degradation if they are not looked after or taken care of. Highly populated coastal areas therefore call for integrated conservation and development approach. Recognizing their valuable services to other life forms, including to mankind, it is imperative that corals are perpetually conserved.